everybody, my name is Mars, you can call me MG if you would like, and today I am sitting on the floor because I'm going to be bringing you my entire physical TBR accurate as of January 1st, 2025. The reason why I have to sit on the floor is because I keep my TBR on this little TBR cart. I would have had to sit on the floor anyway, even if I didn't have this cart, because prior to using this, which I've only had for a couple of months, I was keeping my entire TBR on the bottom shelf of my bookcases, but then IKEA started selling this cart in this cute shade of yellow, and I'm like, okay, I have to get that. I didn't have to, but I wanted to, and that's where we're at now. So I have this cart, it's got 3 tiers to it, and you can kind of see the bottom one. This top one just has a little Highland cow plushie, and you can't see it, but there's also a Christmas gift that I have yet to give to my friend because I haven't seen him yet. Normally, this top shelf is for my TBR throughout the month. That's what I've been doing it as because I don't need all 3 levels for my physical TBR. And then these two are stuffed with books straight through, and then this bottom shelf also has a handful of books behind it. So it is a little bit too much to fully display all the books on 2 shelves, but it's fine. I have 37 books on this TBR, which doesn't seem like a lot compared to a lot of bookish YouTubers. There are people out there who have hundreds upon hundreds of books on their physical TBR. That is not me. That could never be me. That is so overwhelming to me. So I think between 30 and 40 is definitely a good spot for me because I don't have enough to feel overwhelmed, but I have enough that I have choices and options. So I think this is a very good number. But now let's get to actually talking about these books. So I keep these books sorted alphabetically by author's last name on the TBR card because it's just the easiest way to organize it. So up first we have Small Spaces by Catherine Arden. This is the first book in a 4-book middle grade horror series. Then I have Rebel Angels by Libba Bray. This is the second book in a YA trilogy. I got this out of a little free library, even though I have not read the first one. I don't own the first one. Obviously, that's why I'm showing you the second one. I just wanted to pick this up because it was free, and I've read and loved Libba Bray's works before, so that's why it's on the TBR. And then we have Inferno by Dan Brown, which is the book that's been on my physical TBR for the longest. Everything else has been on here for at most just over a year. I think besides this, the oldest book on this TBR has been on the TBR since Christmas 2023. This has been on my TBR, which, how many times am I going to say TBR? Apparently a million. But I've had this since the spring of 2016, which is almost 9 years at this point. I bought it while I was in Italy because it takes place in Florence, and that's where I was, and I meant to get a copy in Italian because I thought that would be neat. I messed up and I got a regular old copy in English, so I will read it eventually. I just don't know when. Up next is Servant of a Dark God by John Brown. I bought this at a thrift store because apparently they don't print this edition anymore. It's like out of print, and they like renamed the book and re-edited it and everything, and this is the first book in a classic fantasy series, and I was like, well, if it's out of print, that means it's kind of limited edition, and it was only like $1.99, so I picked it up, and now I have it, and this is an author that I've wanted to check out for a little while because he is kind of like a well-known name in the high fantasy world, so now I have this. Then I have Whatever Happened to Janie by Caroline B. Cooney. This is the second book in a series, but I have read the first one. The first one is The Face on the Milk Carton, which I've read like 8 times throughout my life, and I found this in a little free library, and I thought it would be fun to collect the series as I go. I have not read the rest of them. I think there's 5 books, but the first one just has a very special place in my heart for a few reasons. The times that I've read it in my childhood. So I saw this and I'm like, this has to come home with me. So I'll collect the rest eventually, but this one I don't think I'm going to read until I reread The Face on the Milk Carton because it has been a fair few years, but I still have this. Then I have Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This is a book that I got at a library book sale, and I wasn't going to get it, but one of the ladies running the book sale was like, oh, we just read this a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago, or something like that, for a book club we have at the library, and everyone absolutely loved it. And I'm like, oh, well, I have to get it now. But it's not really a genre I read. It's like a thriller, I think, but it's about two men, a black man and a white man, who are both ex-convicts, and their sons were married to each other and have been killed. And so the two of them kind of band together to figure out why that happened. So, very intriguing. I'm just a little bit scared. Up next is a classic, and that is Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. I have read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and it's one of my favorite classics of all time. I love that book. It's so good, and I've been wanting to read more of du Maurier's works for a while now, and when I saw this in a little free library, I was like, oh, yes, please, this will help me achieve that goal. So, very much looking forward to this. I think it has to do with pirates, but besides that, I know nothing, so I'm excited. Then we have The Color of Revenge by Cornelia Funk. This is a new release. I'm pretty sure it came out in November of 2024, and this was a Christmas gift from my grandmother this year. I have a few books to talk to you about as Christmas gifts because I got 6 books this year, which is fantastic. You can never go wrong gifting me books. Yeah, this follows a character from the Inkworld trilogy, which is Ink Heart, Ink Spell, Ink Death. He's like a secondary antagonist character, and he kind of just disappears at one point. Well, we know where he goes and everything, but he's like written out of the story. But this is his book, and he's back to get revenge. This cover is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. It's stunning, but I am so excited to read this book. I recently reread the Inkworld trilogy in order to prepare myself for this, so hopefully I can get to it sooner rather than later. Next up, we have The Lord of the Flies by William Golding, and I feel like I'm the only person on this planet who has not read this book in school. I just never did. My sister had to read it in 2 different English classes, and I just didn't. So I know like the vague storyline. I've read a retelling of The Lord of the Flies. I've just never actually read this book. So I picked it up, and I'm actually excited. I know this one is very like split. People either really like it or really hate it, and a lot of the people I know personally are in the second camp, so that worries me, but I think I'm gonna enjoy it. I hope I'm gonna enjoy it. I hope I enjoy every book that I read, but that is The Lord of the Flies. Then we have The Magicians by Lev Grossman, which I've told this story several times, but I'm going to tell it again. Over the summer, I was killing time before an event, and I stopped at a couple of bookstores, and at one of them, it was a used bookstore, and they had this beautiful hardcover edition of this book with this, like, green cover. It had, like, a tree on it or something. It was stunning. I didn't get it because there was, like, a card minimum, and the book obviously wasn't enough for that, otherwise there would have been no issues, but there weren't really any other books that I wanted to get, and I didn't want to just get something for the sake of hitting that card minimum because I didn't have cash, and like this whole ordeal, but I'm like, you know what, I don't need this book, it's fine. I proceeded to only think about that book for weeks. So when I eventually did go back to a different used bookstore, I saw this copy and I'm like, well, I have to get it. So it's not the cover I wanted, it's the Netflix show tie-in edition, which, like, I actually don't mind this. I'm not usually a fan of people on the cover, but this one is, like, okay. This one's decent. But yeah, I have seen a couple of seasons of the show, but not all of it, and also I know that the show and the book are very different, but I am excited to get to this book. The next book that I have is one that I don't really know a lot about, but it is The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. I got this at the same library book sale as Razorblade Tears, and I know that this is a novel from Hell's Library. I know that this follows a librarian who works in the libraries of Hell. I don't know what any of that means, but that sounds pretty dang cool, and this is the first book in a series with either 3 or 4 books. I don't know exactly, but I love this cover. That premise sounds very intriguing. It was 50 cents. Obviously, I bought it. Then we have The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This is a classic. This is the reason why the YA genre exists as it does today. And I just am very intrigued by this. I'd never read it. It's another book that a lot of people read in school, and I just didn't. So I am looking forward to it. It does have deckled edges, which is not my favorite, but I'm willing to look past that. Then we have two more classics. We have Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Just two classics that I've never read that I'm interested in reading, so I got them at a yard sale, I think? I don't remember exactly, but I did get them very recently. I got most of these books within the last 6 months, if I'm being entirely honest. Then we have the last two books that sit on this upper shelf of my TBR cart, and they are The Poppy War and Babel by R.F. Kuang. I bought these while I was on vacation in New England, which I did a vlog of, so I will link that vlog in the description for you to check out. It's one of my favorite vlogs that I've ever made, so show it some love. But R.F. Kuang is an author that I've been meaning to try for eons, so I picked up these books. I didn't mean to pick up two books by the same author while I was on vacation. Babel I bought at a small queer-owned bookstore, and I'm like, I want to support them, so I got this because it's one that I have been thinking about getting for a long time. Like, I've been really wanting to read it. It's dark academia, it deals with languages. We know I'm gonna love that. And then The Poppy War I actually got at a used bookstore, but it's in like perfect condition pretty much. There's like a couple of bits of wear and tear, but it's fine. I purchased much more beat up books and I don't really care about that. But this is the first book in a high fantasy trilogy. It's kind of like grimdark from what I've heard, but I plan on doing a vlog where I read both of these and maybe another R.F. Kuang book. I know she's got Yellowface, which is vastly different to either of these two books, but it is another book she's written. I kind of wanted to do like a taste test of her to see if I enjoy her as an author, which I'm very much hoping that I do. Okay, moving on to the second half of the alphabet being kept on the lower shelf of my TBR cart. We have The Wild Huntress by Emily Lloyd Jones. This is another Christmas gift from my grandmother. I adore Emily Lloyd Jones. She has such a way with words and characters, and I'm so excited to have this. This is her latest release. It came out in September or October, but it is set in the same world as The Drowned Woods and The Bone Houses, which, if you didn't know, The Bone Houses is my favorite book of all time. Obviously, I'm gonna love this. It's thicker than her previous books in this world, which is a bit odd. I didn't expect it to be this thick when I held it in my hands, but here we are. The cover is beautiful. I just have nothing but great things to say about everything about this book, and I haven't even read it yet, so I can't wait to pick this up, which I realize I've said about so many books, but like, this is my physical TBR, so obviously I'm excited to pick them up, otherwise I wouldn't have them. Next up is Colorblind by Sierra Mailey. I don't know much about this. I know it is YA and sapphic and probably very sad based on the blurb, but this is a self-published book that I got out of a little free library. And you know, self-published authors have to support self-published authors, so I'm gonna read it and review it, and then probably put it back in the little free library ecosystem because it doesn't seem like the kind of book that I would keep in my permanent collection. But who knows, maybe it'll absolutely blow me away and I'll want to keep it on my shelf. We'll just have to wait and see. But after that comes Rosemary and Rue by Seanan McGuire. This is the first book in the October Day series, which is a like paranormal or urban fantasy series, and it's so long. I think there's like 18 books in it, so when I do read this, it's biting off a lot. So hopefully I can stick with it because I've heard great things about this. I have read from Seanan McGuire before. I read, what is that called? Into the Drowning Deep, which is a horror novel under her pen name Mira Grant, and I really enjoyed that, so I am very much looking forward to this. I got this at a library book sale. Then I have Ghost Squad by Claribel A. Ortega. I got this at a thrift store off of Jess's recommendation, which, like, it wasn't really Jess's recommendation. Jess has just read from this author before and really loved her, so I'm like, well, if Jess likes this author, I'm gonna like this author. So I picked it up, and I'm very excited. It is just a spooky middle grade, and I'm never gonna say no to a spooky middle grade. The next book I have is A Declaration on the Rights of Magicians by H.G. Perry. This is historical fantasy, which is a genre that I adore. This year, especially, I've been getting so into historical fantasy, and anything from like the 1880s to the 1920s specifically has really been my jam. So, this is the Age of Enlightenment. Robespierre is calling for revolution in France, and yeah. Amid all the upheaval, there is an unknown force inciting violent conflict, and it will require the combined efforts of revolutionaries, magicians, and abolitionists to unmask this hidden enemy before the world falls to darkness and chaos. That sounds pretty sick. And she is quite chunky, over 500 pages, and this is the first book in, I believe, a duology. So it is starting another series, but it's a short series this time, so hopefully it won't take me a million years to finish it out. Then we have The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett, the first book in the Discworld series, which, I mean, there are a lot of different starting places in the Discworld series, but I believe this is the first one that was published, so I'm gonna read them in publication order. I feel like that's the safest bet for me to not lose my mind, because there's, what, 40 something Discworld books? Crazy. But there's like a lot of standalones and like smaller series within the larger world, so it's not like one continuous thing. But yeah, I'm going to make my entrance into the Discworld series soon. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time because I'm a huge fantasy fan, and Discworld is one of the giants of high fantasy, and I can't wait. It's a like humorous fantasy, which is going to be so much fun. Then I have Graveyard Shift by ML Rio. This is another recent release. I love this cover so much. I think it's stunning. She's very tiny. This was another Christmas gift, and I cannot wait to read it. ML Rio's previous work is If We Were Villains. That's what it's called, which I absolutely loved. So I am excited for this, and thankfully I did not get the edition with the deckled edges, because there is one that has deckled edges, and as we've already established, I'm not a fan of that, so thankfully this copy doesn't have them. Next up, we have The Chalice of the Gods and The Wrath of the Triple Goddess by Rick Riordan. These are the first two books in the new Percy Jackson trilogy, because there's 5 books in the original Percy Jackson series, and then Rick wrote a million books, and then he's like, actually, let's return to Percy Jackson. So this takes place, I believe Percy's trying to get into college at this point in time, but it has been a tradition every year since I think the first Heroes of Olympus book came out that my mother get me the latest Rick Riordan book for Christmas. So she's been keeping up with that, and I got this for Christmas in 2023, and then this for Christmas this year. So I've got a little bit of catching up to do, because the third one comes out in 2025. So I have to read these first, obviously. It does bother me a little bit that on the spine of the first one, there's no number, but then on the spine of this one, there's a little number 2. That's a little bit irritating, but not so much that I'm like deeply upset by it. It's just a little bit annoying, but yes. Rick Riordan, one of my favorite authors. I can't believe I haven't read these already. Then we have an ARC that I won in a Goodreads giveaway, and that is Georgie Summers and the Scribes of Scatterplot by Isaac Rudansky. And this is a middle grade fantasy, and it sounds like it has like writing magic or word magic, which sounds up my alley. And I mean, I entered a Goodreads giveaway and then promptly forgot about it, because I enter a lot of Goodreads giveaways, if I'm being honest, and I think I've only won like 3 or 4 times in my entire life, but I won this one, and so this was a very pleasant surprise to get in the mail, and this comes out in February, so fingers crossed I can get to this in January before the release date so I can tell you all about it. Then we have The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the first book in the Witcher series, because I'm pretty sure this is a collection of short stories. Maybe? I don't know, but it's like the recommended starting place for getting into the Witcher books. And The Witcher is a franchise that I've kind of been on the periphery of for eons. Like, I've never watched the show, I've never played the video games, I've never read the books, but like, I know about it, and it sounds like something I would really like, so I picked this up at a yard sale. I want to say back in the spring. Like, it's been a hot minute. And I will get to it and start my adventures in the world of The Witcher. Next up, we have my Christmas gift from my sister, which, of course, she knew to get me a book, and she got me a really good one. It is A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This is a prequel to Pride of the Orange Tree, which I read last year, 2023, I think. That sounds correct, but also incorrect. I don't know. I read it at some point and I loved it. It's an 800-page book that I read in 5 days because I could not put it down. This one's a little bit chunkier. This one's like 850 pages, but I am very excited. Oh, the cover is so beautiful. It's also like textured, which isn't necessary, but it's an added bonus. So I cannot wait to read this. Part of me is like, oh, you should reread Pride of the Orange Tree, but like, do I have the time to reread an 800-page book in preparation for reading an 850-page book? Probably not. But yeah, this is a prequel, so it's not like a direct sequel or anything where I should reread the first one, so I don't think I'm going to, but hopefully I can get to this soon because she takes up a lot of real estate on the TBR cart, and if I can read her and then put her on my regular shelf, that frees up space for more books. Imagine that. Okay, we only have two more books to talk about that are like normal fiction books, and the first one of those is the first Lockwood & Co. book, The Screaming Staircase by Jonathan Stroud. This is another book where I had friends really enjoy it, so when I saw it for cheap at a book sale, I was like, you're coming home with me. I know that there was a Netflix series, but then it was canceled after the first season, which like I don't even have Netflix, so I wouldn't have watched it, but this is middle grade, it's spooky, it's got ghosts. I believe it might also be like an alternate history type of fantasy, like it's set in our world, but not quite our world. I don't know. I'm very intrigued, so we're gonna give that a go. And finally, we have Zodiac Rising by Katie Zhao. This is dark academia, paranormal slash fantasy. It's got vampires. It's set at a boarding school or something. It has a magic system based on the Chinese zodiac. There's a heist. It just has so many buzzwords about it that I'm like, sign me up. This book came out, I want to say in September, and I have read from Katie Zhao before. I read How We Fall Apart, is that what it's called? Which is a contemporary dark academia book, and it was chef's kiss, so good. So the fact that this has that dark academia element, but then so much more that I love, like, I'm so excited. And this was a Christmas gift from my grandmother, so shout out Grandma, getting me so many great books. Shout out to everyone who got me books this Christmas because they are just amazing choices. So yeah, I'm very, very much looking forward to this, as I am with every other book on my physical TBR, because why wouldn't I be? Finally, we come to the last handful of books. These are the ones that have been living like behind the rest of the books because they didn't fit regularly, but these are all of my weird books, so they're not like your regular old fiction. There's nonfiction and classics and a whole bunch of stuff. So we're gonna start off with the two nonfiction books that I have, and they are The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. This is about the Chicago World's Fair and H.H. Holmes' murder hotel. He's known as America's first serial killer. And like I know about H.H. Holmes, I know what he did, but this has kind of been all over the internet in recent years. Like people are loving this book, even though I think it came out in like 2003 or something, so like it is older, but like I've seen a lot recently about it of people really enjoying it, so I'm excited for that. And then I also have Atomic Women: The Untold Stories of the Scientists Who Helped Create the Nuclear Bomb by Roseanne Montillo? Not sure how to pronounce that, but this is about the women who worked on creating the atomic bomb, so it deals with the topic of women in STEM, which is always an interesting time, especially historically, because like even now, like women don't always have the easiest time in STEM fields, but like imagine that almost 100 years ago. Crazy. But then also deals with the like moral implications of the atomic bomb. So I'm very excited to get to this one. It has a beautiful cover. So I am looking forward to reading this, as I've said a million times. Then I have two Dover thrift editions, which is just like an old edition of books that I collect. I've got 25 or so of them, and the two that are sitting on my TBR cart are Civil Disobedience and Other Essays by Henry David Thoreau and The Mysterious Stranger and Other Stories by Mark Twain. So I have read Thoreau before. I read Walden, and it was interesting. It was a little bit dry. So like I don't think I'm gonna have a great time reading his essays, but for the collection, I'm gonna do it. And Mark Twain, I don't know if I've ever read before. I know he's the one who wrote like Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer. I don't remember if I read those in class. I know I've seen movies, but I don't know. I've been on the Disney ride, and like I think it's a ride. It might just be like a location in Disney. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been to Disney, but like I know about Mark Twain's stories. I just don't know if I've ever read his works. So we're gonna pick up this short story collection and see what I think. And then to round things out, my last three books in my physical TBR are three Shakespeare books because I love Shakespeare. I collect his books. I collect them in a lot of different editions, and it all looks kind of mismatched on my shelf, but at the same time, it looks pretty cool like that. So the three that are on my TBR are The Merchant of Venice, Measure for Measure, and Love's Labour's Lost. I don't really know what these two are about. I haven't read them, seen them, anything like that. Love's Labour's Lost, I actually have seen a production of. I studied abroad in London in 2017 in the spring, and as part of that, I took a class on theater, and we went to productions, I think like every other week or so. And one of the productions we saw was Love's Labour's Lost, but it was set in like a new situation. It wasn't as Shakespeare would have staged it. It was given like the backdrop of World War II, and that was so like genius. Like it was such a cool way to stage this play. So I'm looking forward to actually reading the play myself and taking in all of the words because I obviously don't remember exactly what all of the words were said when I saw the production, but yeah, some Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare, and I'm always gonna have a bunch on my TBR until I read all of them, which is going to happen eventually. That's a weird thought that I've never considered before. Anyway, that's the end of my TBR. Like I said, there's 37 books on this TBR, which is manageable for me. I think it's a good number. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you've enjoyed them, if you haven't, all that fun stuff. I look forward to reading your comments and starting a conversation. But if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. You can subscribe to my channel for more content, and that way I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone!